The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Garmin versus WastedLocker, Cyber Resilience Lessons from the Biggest Cyber Attacks of 2020, sponsored by Immersive Labs. My name is Jessica Gallus of SANS, and today's featured speakers are Chris Pace, Technology Advocate, and Kev Breen, Director of Cyber Threat Research at Immersive Labs, and Jake Williams, SANS analyst, instructor, and course author at SANS, who will be moderating today's webcast. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be made available for viewing and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Jake.
Hey, thanks so much, Jessica. And I think you may have misspoken when you said earlier that I was here as a SANS analyst. I believe here I'm the victim on this webcast, if I understand the position correctly. No, that said, seriously, I'm really excited about this webcast for a lot of reasons. One of the big ones here is that we're actually walking through live a scenario that, hand to heaven, I have not seen before. Chris, I think, is going to back me up on this, but this is using the Immersive Labs platform. If you look down in your chat, there's a URL where you can log in, and you don't need an account or anything, but you can drop in here the access code, and you can help vote as we get to decision points or injects through this tabletop exercise. So I'm really excited about this. I'm either going to sink or swim with Kev on my team over here, and of course Chris is going to be our master of ceremonies, performing all the injects. So Chris, I'm going to kick it over to you, man. Ready to sink or swim here.
Thanks, Jake. It's not gonna. It's honestly not gonna be as bad as all that. We're all in it. We're all in it together, including obviously our participants on the webinar. Yeah, head over to the URL and enter the code there, and you'll be able to cast your vote as we head to make the decisions that we need to make through this scenario. So we're not going to loiter anymore. We're going to head straight into the exercise. Just some background so that you understand what you're seeing here. This, as Jake says, is the Immersive Labs platform. This is the Cyber Crisis Simulator, which is effectively a digitized tabletop, if you like. What you're seeing is one of our scenarios that we have built, and it's built based on the Garmin ransomware attack, but it isn't actually the Garmin ransomware attack, if that makes sense. It's inspired by it, but no, fitness devices or GPS were harmed in the making of this scenario. Jake is desperate to talk about his Garmin watch. We'll get there. We'll get there. And so this scenario is one that we have built, but actually the system allows for customized scenarios. And there are two, I think, really interesting things that are going to happen that it's worth pointing out. The decisions that we make will impact what happens to us next in the scenario. That's the first thing. And the decisions that we make will also have an impact on certain factors, and we'll look more closely at those as we actually move into the first inject. Also, excitingly, during this inject, we're going to get our hands on some of the malware as well. So there's a more technical element to this too that Kev is going to talk through. So our scenario begins here, 1 p.m. on a Friday, where the CISO sitting at our desk thinking about the weekend, and a hurried and stressed IT manager comes into our office. Numerous users have reported they are unable to access files to conduct their work. The IT manager advises that they investigate these reports. Upon initial investigation, it seems like we have been infected with ransomware. So let's move into that first inject. Oh yeah, the fictional company is called Glomax. I'm not sure we ever refer to that again, but at least now you know. We work for Glomax. Okay. So, no longer thinking of the weekend, we make our way into the boardroom. All the heads of department are filing in. Every department has a job to do here to get things working again. And looking around the room, it's agreed that we'll check in every 2 hours and make less strict check-ins every 30 minutes or so. The infection is recent, and ransom notes are showing up across the network now. So here is the ransom note that we're seeing on the machines. It's clearly directed at us, Glomax, telling us our network is encrypted now, asking us to contact them to get the price for our data, also reminding us that we should not give this email to third parties and not to rename or move the file, and There you go. So it's clearly directed at us as a company. We can see that. So let's see what our choices are here. Okay, so option one, and what we'll do is we'll go through each of the options and then we'll open the voting. While the voting is open, Jake and I will talk through some of the options, what we might choose, why we might choose that, why we definitely wouldn't choose some. So that's the way we're gonna get this to work. So option one, take all services offline to prevent any further damage. We need to pull all services offline in order to prevent the spread of infection. Customers will notice, but at the end of the day, marketing and PR can manage this. Leave all services online for customers. Let's have everything left online. With some luck, we can nip this in the bud early and customers will be none the wiser. Contact the ransomware group. The ransom note includes an email address. Perhaps we can reach out, reach an understanding if we talk to them directly. Or finally, form a response team. The SOC team have been prepped to take on an incident in the event that one occurs. It's now time to mobilize this task force. So let's open the voting. For anyone who's not yet participating, that URL and access code are in the chat window in GoToWebinar, so you can head over there and join, and the voting is now open. So Jake, instinctively, what do you think you would lean towards as a sort of first priority?
Well, as an incident responder, obviously I like the fourth action, right? I mean, we have a response team, let's use it. I love the value proposition of that. And I'm thinking like, let's go be the hero, but I'm also looking at we don't have enough information yet about, is this spreading? And I remember NotPetya, and I've worked through a few of these ransomware events, and I feel like in a lot of scenarios, taking systems offline may be the appropriate route to go. Because I feel like that it gives me a chance to at least kind of pause in the bleeding, right? So my gut reaction, again, would have been the incident response team, but I'm also thinking back to previous things that we've worked, and I think taking the systems offline is probably where I'm going. The two that I'm not enamored with, leaving stuff online, again, I'm gonna harken back to NotPetya. And then contact the ransomware group. We don't even know what the scenario is yet. I mean, other than there's a ransom note. I'm certainly not going to go in and try and coordinate. We're in an information asymmetry right now, and I don't want to talk to an attacker that knows more about the attack than I do.
That's wise. What's great about doing scenarios like this is you can ask questions that you don't have the answer to. That's what I always really enjoy about these. So there are tons of questions that occur to me always when I'm looking at the first part of a scenario, which is like, what are people actually experiencing, given on what we know about the ransom note and where it's appearing and how it's appearing. And I guess if a very thin or a very shallow amount of investigation has been done, we probably want to find out as much of that as possible at this stage. Does it look like it's spreading? You already touched on it. Are we aware of whether this is a thing that do we need to move faster? Do we need to have our comms options standing by now if we're going to take services offline, and what are they? There's just a whole load of questions. So let's imagine that we're gravitating towards option one, and we've said marketing and PR can manage this. What are our expectations as the kind of security representative of the company? We're acting as a CISO in this case. What are our expectations of that PR and comms? What must it do in order to effectively, cover us if we're going to just suddenly pull everything offline?
I think you have to definitely say that you have either you have to be transparent, and this is something that we should have discussed before an event like this, right? Either we need to be transparent that there's a ransomware attack underway, or we can call it an IT services issue, which is going to cause people to say, oh, ransomware. So you can either be transparent, or you can have some assumptions around that. But either way, I think there needs to be a communication. There's a cybersecurity event or an IT services I probably wouldn't call it IT service. I'd probably call it cybersecurity event. And whether or not we say ransomware, people are going to draw that conclusion anyway. You're going to have reporters on the phone, so I would just go ahead and say probably ransomware. And we're still assessing the stage or assessing the damage.
Well, this is your opportunity to talk about your smartwatch, because one of my questions on my list is what are the risks of us taking services offline, at a snap? What risk does that present, even on its own?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is we have to look at, obviously, business lines Are we sending employees home, right? If we're like a manufacturing business, taking the Garmin side, a lot of folks think of Garmin like just a, just a device that, it's a fitness device. It's a, I have one of the Instinct watches, and I actually use it as a health device, right? And I'm not going to get into the specific condition, but I need to monitor my pulse rate, and I need that historical data, specifically when I'm sleeping. And so while I can look at my watch at any point and see the graph over the last like 30 minutes or so where my pulse has been, I'm obviously not awake to look at it. I need that biofeedback data, to stay healthy ultimately. And so, for me, this actually represents a health risk, and Garmin as well represented a health risk. When it was offline, I was very public on Twitter saying like, hey guys, like get this back online. If that requires paying the ransom, stop this. At least be able to sync, to our devices. Garmin's application architecture didn't allow that without their back-end servers. Maybe a lot of this might depend on some of the architecture decisions we've made up to this point.
Okay, let's Kev, let's see what the audience said. We've had 50 odd people vote, so it was an interesting split. Some did head towards the incident response team, but I suppose it's that this is a balance between a bias to action versus a bias to process, which is kind of an interesting question in and of itself. Sometimes when we've been through these scenarios before, people taking the role of the CEO in some of those will ask the question directly, can we call this an incident now? And that is then kind of what ends up triggering whether we need that team, where the plan actually kicks into action. All that stuff can end up generating more debate than what decisions to actually make during the exercise. So I guess it's not surprising that some people leant towards that option. We're going to go, Jake, we're going to go with you. We're going to choose option 1.
Definitely. And Chris, if I can mention on the bias to action side here too, if you spend time doing stuff like this, you'll come in with that bias to action. You'll start working through some of that, figuring out what are our defaults going to be so that you're not discussing them when time actually matters. You're discussing them when time effectively is free to us. Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me, we did one of these with with Phil Venables, the CISO Goldman Sachs, and he made exactly that point. Most of the decisions that you need to make like in the very early stages, and so that has a direct impact on where you decide to go really early on. So yes, taking everything offline means any data currently unencrypted will remain so. That's one less thing to worry about when restoring services. However, customers will immediately be impacted by the lack of services. So now this is a good opportunity to look at our indicators there on the right-hand side. So these are the things that we kind of care about as we're looking to make decisions through this scenario. The first is our stock price. We're a publicly traded company and a very valuable one at that. So our stock price is important to us. The impact that this has on our share prices, it matters. And we can get into what happened to Garmin towards the end of the scenario. I'll tell you that fun story. And then our company reputation, clearly, and RTO, which is, I always forget, is either restore time objective,
recovery time objective.
Recovery time objective.
There we go. Actually, one of you, Jake or Kev, can explain to us what we mean by recovery time objective. Whoever goes first. Go on, Kev.
So RTO. So here we're kind of stepping outside of the world of cyber and more into generic disaster recovery, business continuity. So you have a couple of key indicators. You have your recovery time objective and you have your recovery point. So the recovery time is how long do we think it should take us to return to normal operations in the event of a catastrophe, whether it's ransomware, whether it's an earthquake that's taken the building offline, how long can we restore before we restore services? And then the other thing we've got to factor in is our recovery point. So at what point in time can we restore to? So if I'm doing backups every minute, then I can restore to 1 minute ago. If I'm doing backups every week, then I've lost potentially an entire week's worth of data. And the earliest point in time I can go back to is 1 week in the past. That means if I restore from backups, there's no question about it, I have lost an entire week's worth of all of my users' data. So that's recovery time and recovery points.
So in this case, our RTO is 4 hours, and you can see that obviously, the action that we've taken now has had an impact on that, and other actions that we take throughout the scenario will also have an impact on that. So our job when it comes to this is not it's very unlikely, given that we're experiencing a crisis, that any of these indicators will go up. I'm afraid, Jake. We're not at a point where we're going to make money on the stock while we're suffering a ransomware attack. So what we're looking to do, rather aptly, is flatten the curve. That's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep these graphs as shallow as possible as they plunge downwards, which they no doubt will. Right. So let's go to the next. Let's go to the next inject. Okay, services have been taken offline, and we make the decision to mobilize our incident response team. The head of the CERT, Kev, you're up, comes to us. The team has found a copy of the ransomware's binary file on one of the servers. So what are our options here? I can see that we've got a link to the actual ransomware itself. Let's have a look. So we have. Oh,
sorry, going to load this because this will take a couple of minutes for me to spin up my sandbox.
Set that going.
So I'm going to start that going.
What's going to happen here is we're going to end up actually being able to take a look at the WastedLocker ransomware in action. But as the CISO now, we have a couple of choices. We can either head over to the CERT base of operations. We can't sit idly by. At least being in the center of the CERT team means we can get information quicker. Or we could wait for someone to report to us on their findings. Now, what I love about this is it goes straight to the soft. This is entirely dependent on the kind of leader that you are. You're either someone who's going to go and sit next to Kev while he analyzes malware, which I'm sure is thrilling to watch, or you're going to trust Kev to come back to you in a timely manner with the information that you need. This is a bit of fun. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but I guess you probably don't want to go and sit on top of them at their desk, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we've all been there. If you've done incident response before, you've been there where folks have asked you for constant status updates. And you're like, hey, what's the status? I'm like, the same thing as it was the last time they asked me 3 minutes ago. I've no joke gotten out of where, they'll schedule a status update meeting that's supposed to last 15 minutes, ends up lasting an hour and a half, and we're on 2-hour update cycles. And I'm like, guys, like, legit, I now need a bio break. I'm going to prep for the next meeting by the time. So I'm going to say here that given only these two options, I'm going to stand by. I'm going to trust my team, and I'm going to trust that they're going to brief me appropriately.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
So that we're going to go for option 2. Let's see if we can see if the audience agreed.
Ooh.
Oh,
interesting.
Some control freaks in the audience there.
There's a couple of people there who are going to irritate me for the next several minutes while I go through this. The answers will come, I promise you.
So here you're able to see how what we're doing here is we're kind of connecting the sort of traditional tabletop exercise with the technical element, right? With the incident response part, with the it could be we could have a more explicit forensics task. There's any number of things that we could do using a sandbox like this. But the idea is to try and make a connection between perhaps quite a nebulous executive tabletop exercise and a real hands-on with the thing that is the cause of it that could be of benefit to more technical teams. So Kev, what are we looking at?
So broadly speaking, so when we talk about malware reverse engineering, we can go very technically, very quickly. We can go very deep, very quick. And that's great. But when you're looking at crisis, you're looking at incident response. There's a couple of things you want to do. You want to get some very quick answers out very quickly. You want a good understanding. Bear with me a second.
Didn't do anything for too long, basically, is what happened there.
Yeah, I tried to pre-start that lab so it's ready, and I waited too long. So while we wait for this one to drop back in, so broadly speaking, like I said, when we're in incident response mode, I want to get some very quick answers, some very quickly. I want to get those up to the decision makers so they can make informed decisions. And then while that's happening, I'm going to start deeper diving into the malware, understanding more of its behavior, and then I'll keep those feedback loops going. So what we're looking at here is something called dynamic analysis. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a safe space. I'm going to run this malware and I'm going to observe what it's doing. So I'm going to look at some basic things like what's it starting? Is it doing network activity? What behaviors? So are we talking ransomware? Are we talking secondary infections? Are we pulling down other stages? I'm just doing quick, dirty malware analysis in these first instances. Like I said, get the important information to the people who need it quickly. So from here, I'm literally just going to start the ransomware going. And again, so these environments are all completely isolated from the network. This box is on its own, but it's recording all the network traffic, all the process activity, so I can get a really good, rich set of data out of it without potentially infecting wider networks. So as we go along, so these questions here that you can see, they're just directing me through this, so I'm not going to focus too much on these for now. But the important things I want to look for are observing what's happening. So I'm going to take a quick peek in the task manager, see what's happening. I can see, hopefully, some things are going to encrypt very shortly. There's always a danger of live demos. This is also why we don't like people over our shoulder while we're doing this.
It's not ransomwaring quickly enough.
It's not.
Well, you know, the other thing too is the CSI cyber effect, right? I find when there are folks over my shoulder, they expect me to investigate the incident, figure out who it is, attribute it, and then go pistol whip some suspect, right, out on the street, all in like 15 minutes, right? And I'm like, that's not how real world works, right? So yeah, I much prefer not having somebody over my shoulder here too. Kev is definitely living dangerously, right?
I am. So the nice thing is though, like because I'm in a sandbox, because I've got full control of this, if it doesn't do what I want to do, I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds. What I can do is very quickly, within a couple of minutes, just hit the reset on this sandbox, and I'm going to get everything back to a nice clean state, which I'm going to do right now. So I'm just going to end this and start this up again. So while we wait for this, the other thing I'm going to be doing, so while I'm having a look at this, so one of the things that's going to happen is, because this is ransomware, I'm going to see the ransom note. I'm going to see some file extensions. I'm going to see some indicators. And I'm not constrained to just looking at what's happening on Box. There's a lot of open source intelligence, a lot of shared reporting, and the InfoSec community shares a lot of this information. There are some great sites where I can go and upload samples like VirusTotal, and we'll talk about the dangers of that in a moment, and copies of ransomware notes. And I can very quickly pull some indicators back, and that will tell me what kind of ransomware it is it being used by groups, how do those groups operate. So using that and searching for those indicators can be very useful. Now, the important thing to note, VirusTotal is a wonderful service. I love it. I use it almost daily. However, that was a bit of a downfall for Garmin, because Garmin either deliberately or accidentally uploaded this sample to VirusTotal, and researchers and anybody who pays VirusTotal can go and grab all of those samples. So very quickly, what we saw was researchers identified a piece of ransomware submitted to VirusTotal that had Garmin listed in the ransomware note, that was adding Garmin to file extensions. And I mean, that's a fairly big indicator that somebody has targeted Garmin. And I think that appeared in VirusTotal about 4 minutes after their API services went offline. I mean, there's cause and effect, and there's jumping to some conclusions, but there is that. So whilst these, the point I want to make is these resources are incredibly powerful, and it's wonderful that they're free. But as an organization, you have to be conscious of how much data you're potentially sharing.
The other thing is, of course, if your comms people have gone out and said, it's an IT thing, we're having a systems problem, and suddenly people like Jake, who've got massive Twitter followings, are like, oh, hang on, turns out this is Kevin Beaumont's famous for it, outing these people. But you know, if that's a risk, sharing that data in that way, exactly the same thing happened with Honda. You know, we've got a bit of IT trouble, and they'd uploaded all these files that had, you know, Honda domain names and server names in them. It was exactly the same. Right, are we trying to get ransomware again there?
We're trying to get ransomware again now. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of horror stories where people have uploaded PDFs to VirusTotal from emails thinking they're malicious, and turns out it's like your entire sales records or all of your Christmas bonuses. There's a wealth of information in there, and like I said, they're great services, but just be careful, use them wisely.
We pulled one out while we're waiting to get ransomware. We pulled one out that was a Excel spreadsheet. I know Excel's been in the news recently, but with about 50,000, that was from a bank with about 50,000 loan balances and social security numbers, all kinds. It was a treasure trove, and we were actually looking for malicious Excel documents when we found it, and trying to even contact the bank and explain to them what happened. They were just blown away that anybody else could see this data. We're like, just because you don't have a paid account doesn't mean right? And
yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Second time lucky. I was able to get some details. So so what I can do now is I can very quickly confirm that yes, this was in fact ransomware. Based on the note, the structure of the note, and the data that's in there with the file extensions, then I can very easily identify this as WastedLocker, or at least somebody pretending to be WastedLocker. I can get some file hashes. I can do some comparisons. Like fuzzy hashing is a wonderful, wonderful technology. So with a reasonable degree of confidence, I can say that this is WastedLocker. And through open source research, there's a couple of other things that I can infer. And that's to say that WastedLocker operates in a particular way. So they were it's very likely they were already in our networks. They were operating some kind of backdoor through probably some other infection vector, like a F5 appliance or an OpenSSL appliance, or Citrix. There's been some big hitters. They most likely used one of those to gain their initial foothold, to position themselves inside the network, and then to deploy this ransomware at the most opportune moment. So that's some information that I can quickly extract from this. The other thing I can extract from this is that Garmin WastedLocker uses almost perfect crypto. The way they're building their keys, the way they're encrypting this, unless I was on the machine at the time it was infected, there is almost 99.999% chance that I am not going to be able to decrypt any of these files without support from the ransomware operator. And that is the initial report I will be sending back.
Which I guess that, you know, for someone at the top of an organization who's a decision maker, like a question that will come out if you're a novice is, well, it was encrypted. Surely it can just be unencrypted. How hard can it be? So having that intelligence is actually really useful insight, because it kind of takes that off the table and it stops it being a wasted conversation. Okay, should we head back to our scenario and to our next?
You annoyed me over my shoulder, so.
Okay. Lead malware analyst confirms the worst. Systems have been infected with WastedLocker, affecting all sensitive and user data. Unfortunately, the ransomware uses strong encryption that the team cannot crack. Files and data are irrecoverable without backups or paying the ransom demand. Public reports of the group behind WastedLocker ransomware state they typically don't exfiltrate and sell the data on the dark web. That's not a guarantee. That's just what we understand. With everything offline, we are now reasonably confident attackers no longer have access to our network. Everything must come back as soon as possible. The longer we take, the more negative social media posts surface. Which service should the IT team start with? Right, let's have a look at the options. Now, Jake's massively biased here. He's going to go straight to Consumer Connect, which consumers are taking to social media to bemoan, this is almost like it was written for you, to bemoan the information vacuum surrounding the outage. The longer these services are down, the more negative media circulates. Getting this service back up eliminates two issues in one. Or our first option, flight services, aviation services are essential. All aircraft that can't connect to the aviation database to update navigation devices are grounded until further notice, and airlines are unable to schedule or plan flights without Glomax services. Or the website. The longer the website is down with a vague maintenance statement, the more likely it is that staff will leak information. Pulling the website back up shows both staff and customers that something is being done. So, Jake, what's your immediate response? And Kev, you can open the voting. Jake, what's your immediate feelings?
I mean, my gut feeling here, I'm going to take my bias out of this just to be straight. My gut feeling, of course, is flight services. I want to get stuff, I want to get that restored. A lot of this is going to depend on my operations manager, right? So this is, as a CISO, I'm going to look at ops and say, hey, what percentage of, I don't know how Glomax is positioned here. The flights sound important, but if PR is more important, then I need to look at the website, right? I don't want to pull a Sony, where, not to involve anybody, I don't want to pull a Sony here and create an information vacuum. So I'm on the fence here. I almost want to see where voting plays out between option 1 and option 3, because I don't know how our business is structured, but my gut says flight services. Again, if consumer plays a bigger role, PR plays a bigger role, then it's going to be website.
The wording of the scenario sort of it's nuanced, isn't it? It leads you towards aviation services because some of the language that's used in it, I would tend to agree. Just words like, essential and flights are grounded, they kind of they sort of imply a severity that I suppose
right,
and I suppose
right, it could be a few flights versus our vast majority of our business's worth is on the consumer side, and again, without knowing that, it's a hard decision to make.
And but if we're thinking
this is something, again, if you haven't discussed business operations and you're the CISO, you're failing at the job because you can't answer a question like this.
And if we're thinking about the share price as one of those indicators, maybe we'd be ruthless and say, actually, you know what? Even if it was widespread across flight services, we'll suck it up because our share price is being hurt by the fact that our consumer services are not connected. Maybe, but I think your instinct is probably right. Let's see what the responses say. But I'm feeling option 1. But oh well, it's
overwhelming. We're going with the crowd.
Yeah. Okay. Option 1 then. Option 1 it is. That was a great answer. Aviation services are a high priority, with the effect of the outages reaching as far as commercial flights and shipping aircraft. Whilst getting all services back up and running is a priority, this affects a large portion of your customers and their own operations. In reality, Garmin updated flight databases monthly and happened to do so a few days before the incident. It might be worth checking how many people that issue is affecting. Okay, so let's move to the next. With IT looking at getting systems sorted, we turn to the HR department. It appears that someone has been leaking information to the press. Journalists are reporting the downtime as a ransomware attack and citing internal sources. The disclosed information has been confirmed internally. It's likely that employees are leaking information to the media, but it's still unknown whether this is inadvertent or not. Our PR manager contacts us during that 30-minute checkup window with some options going forward. They request advice on the best course of action to de-escalate that situation. So we can see from our attachment here that there's the news is out there telling us that we've been allegedly hit and that they're demanding $10 million. So what are our options here? Pull in IT and start an internal investigation about who leaked information. It's important to identify where those leaks came from to prevent more surfacing. Option 2, instruct employees to cease leaking information via internal comms. Further leaked information is not an option. All employees must be aware that there will be ramifications should anyone be caught leaking information. Or review the policy on staff leaking information. It's worth checking what the company policy is before doing anything drastic. I think we can probably do this fairly quickly. Jake, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, first off, we probably have a policy around leaking any confidential data. So I feel like that's problem number 3. I feel like is a waste of time. Number 1, I'm probably going to avoid as well, purely because I don't want to take investigative resources away at this very critical time. So I'm going to gravitate to number 2. But for whatever it's worth, I'd add here that I'd probably also educate staff on the damage that this is doing rather than threatening, but it is going to be a communication back to them with the follow-up. First carrot, then stick. But yeah, number 2 for the win.
It's a potential impact on time and morale, isn't it? If you deliver that message in the wrong way, the risk is that you end up demoralizing a team that you're trying to make use of during a crisis. So let's see what the audience have to say, but I'm pretty confident it's going to be option 2. Yeah, okay, let's move on. Well, we flattened that one curve there at least. Okay, IT department sorting out the systems, check. Internal leaks being addressed, check. The marketing and PR departments have been firefighting the press and social media situations tirelessly. Social media analytics show a dramatic increase in activity since users became aware they were unable to upload their exercise stats to fitness apps. Customers are struggling to get in touch with customer service outside social media. And on top of that, a subsidiary in the Southern Hemisphere has actually released a statement on social media. Marketing and PR come to us with various options. Consulting our incident response plan, which of these options is the best way forward for the marketing and PR? So I think these attachments show us some of the kinds of tweets that we're seeing. So these are the analytics showing us a spike in our social media. And then this is the subsidiary that have gone Lone Ranger and sent a status out saying that servers are down, so that's useful. And then I'm assuming that the last, for maintenance, of course, for maintenance. Next, we'll be saying we take that our customers' security seriously, and then of course all the tweets from all of the angry people like Jake who can't get their devices to work. Okay, so what are our options here now? Option 1: release a global holding statement. Creating a global holding statement could calm the waters and allow the team to get back on top of the crisis. Get marketing and PR to contact their counterparts in international subsidiaries with the statement to present in a unified format. Option 2: begin replying on social media. Marketing and PR can create an automated message to allow users to continue feeling heard. This leaves the team free to tackle other PR issues. Or option 3: put up a statement on your website saying you're doing maintenance work. Don't let marketing and PR get too hasty in confirming the ransomware. It's best to know all the information before adding fuel to the fire. Acknowledge there's a problem, but deflect from the media speculation and specifically call it maintenance. So I think we probably do this one quite quickly as well. Jake, what do you think?
I'm immediately off of number 3, right? Lying to the media never works, right? I can think of a few reporters in particular that I definitely am not lying to. You can take a small story and make it, this one's already big, but even if it's a small story, the lie itself can basically kick off the Streisand effect. So number 3 is out for me. As far as replying to users on social media, I think this is another bad plan, particularly in an automated fashion. This is not going to win any customer trust. I think the global statement and trying to, we've already got a division that went Blade Runner. Let's bring everybody into the fold and say, hey, here's the expectation. Here's what we're communicating going forward. All comms come through us. Number 1.
And it feels like what you're saying. One of the questions I had in mind this was how honest are we ready to be in that statement? And it feels like it needs to communicate enough, but not too much. So how do we strike that balance when I've got a thing that I've paid money for that doesn't do what it needs to do anymore, and it clearly is a security issue? Like, what are the right statements to make? What are the good ones?
I mean, we have to be transparent at this point. Our subsidiary already said ransomware. There's already speculation around ransomware the second we pulled stuff offline. So I don't think that we're in a position where we really have a lot of options around this, I guess. I think we're going to have to say ransomware. It's all coming out in the wash anyway. Now, as far as details go, amount requested for payments, some of that other stuff, we don't need to be, and certainly we're not going to talk about exactly what our RTO is. I see that going poorly because we're going to get held to that down the road. But I think for me, it's semi-transparent is probably it. I definitely don't want to make a statement I'm going to have to walk back later. So I'm going to kick over to my tech folks. If there's anything in there that may be nitpicked apart in our statement, we want to make sure that tech gets a piece in that, so that again, that somebody like a Kevin Beaumont to me, somebody doesn't start pulling apart those threads and saying we were disingenuous kind of thing. And so semi-transparent, but making sure we don't have to walk back.
Okay, let's have a look.
Yeah.
Okay, option 1. Let's move on. We're doing okay for time. We're doing okay for time. Okay, a global holding statement acknowledges there's something wrong, which is kind of exactly what you said. So in spite of the technical teams working to get the systems back online as quickly as possible, there is still pressure coming from internal and external stakeholders, finance people, to resume business operations faster. There is also increasing pressure from people in the business to pay the ransom demands. Your recovery point objective is at least a week behind the date of encryption. Even if you restore from backups, you'll be missing 1 week's worth of data. The ransom note has an email address, so you advise the incident response team to make contact. you need to at least know the amount they're asking for before ruling anything out. Having made initial contact with the group via the email address, they have demanded $10 million for the encryption key. The group behind the attack, Evil Corp, is currently under sanction by the US government, meaning the legality of paying is questionable. What should you advise the decision makers to do? So let's have a look at our options here. Okay, option 1, pay the ransom through one of our subsidiaries. As a global company, we can pay through one of our subsidiaries, get our data back, and not break US sanctions. Everyone's a winner. Option 2, engage a third-party ransomware negotiation firm. You might be able to avoid the legality issue by involving a third-party ransomware negotiation company to start getting those systems back up and running. Or option 3, do not pay the ransom. Your technical teams have told you with a little more time, they think they can restore everything and get your services back up and running. So let's open the voting. And Jake, what are your feelings?
Okay, well, let's start with number 3, right? I hate paying ransoms. I broker a good number of them, and I hate doing it. It makes me sick to my stomach. But I understand the business side, and realistically, we're way behind our recovery point objective. Realistically, that's going to be a big business impact. We already have business impact. I think not paying takes us from bad to worse. So I think number 3 for me is out. Now I'm down to number 1 or number 2. And having been through this a few times, I'm going to tell you that up front, I might have chosen number 1 as a CISO who's never talked to anybody about this, hasn't planned. But there are mechanics that are involved with trying to pay a ransom, right? For instance, how do I go get $10 million in Bitcoin? Just because I have $10 million now, right, doesn't mean that I can go get it. The other problem is I don't have any good, now granted, Kev gave me some intelligence a minute ago, but I don't know the reputation of this specific actor. I don't know if it's somebody trying to look like Evil Corp or is it really Evil Corp, right? I don't even know that. So I feel like I need a trusted advisor here. And for that reason, more even than the offset of liability, although that's a big thing, right? I feel like number 2 is going to be the right answer here because I want that intelligence around the reputation of, basically, and also timelines, right? How quickly do I get a key and a decryptor back? That's all stuff I don't know, and so for that reason, I'm going with option 2.
So I think while we're doing well for time, so I just want to dwell here a little bit because classically the do you pay the ransom question is the question, and it's because it's dripping with all this morality. And I suppose that was a very pragmatic approach. But there are organizations that have begun their crisis by drawing a line in the sand that just says we don't pay ransom, like we just don't. We'd rather suck up the hit to our data or whatever the impact is. We'd rather do that than pay a criminal group. So I think it's interesting, isn't it, in the context of responding to an incident. If that's removed from you, if that option is removed from you, then A, it makes the job a lot harder. But B, there's going to be a greater impact that a business has to be ready to absorb.
No, I agree with you. I'll tell you, like when we do the ransomware tabletops, right? Routinely, I hear people, particularly on moral grounds, sometimes they claim ethical, whatever. I'll go with either one, right? Whichever one you prefer to term it. Will say we'll never pay a ransom, and I say, well, okay, let me go ahead and pitch a scenario to you, right? 100% of your data is encrypted. The backups are gone. You literally have to greenfield the company. You are a month out from being able to rebuild your global IT infrastructure. Everything's down, and 6 months from now, the company is going to be a third of the size it is today. You'll have laid off 5,000 employees. Will you pay the ransom? And they're like, I said morally, because if somebody says moral grounds, I'm like, morally, you put 5,000 people out of work, right? Your stock you owe to your investors if you're a publicly traded company as well to maximize their share value. Where does that sit in your moral compass? And I'm like, well, nothing. Important. And so we always try to take it to I at least try to take it to an extreme where it's like, okay, let's put this back on the table. Once it's on the table, then we can start figuring out like, what's that, where's the line where it's pay versus don't pay. But I find that when you put it in those terms, almost everybody brings it back into the table. And if they don't, I just get more people in the room because there's always somebody who's ready to go, oh yeah, no, that's the right route.
And ransomware operators they understand this as well. So we've seen a lot of them introduce this new dynamic where they say, hey, I've got your data, and if you're not going to pay me, that's fine. Everybody can have all of that data I stole, to try and force those ransoms to be paid.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that whole, I mean, so, you know, in the context of the available intelligence that we have, we understood that this isn't a thing that this particular group does, but we do know that there are, you know, more stealthy operators who are prepared to sit in networks exfiltrating data before they encrypt, in order to give themselves leverage when it comes to payment of the ransom. The other thing in this context is actually that Garmin's success meant that, you know, that I think their revenues last year were like $4 billion or something. Like this was a cost that they, you know, could absorb given the nature of their business. But of course, there is a PR angle as well, and I guess that was a decision that they had to make at that time. Right. So Jake is saying option 2. Let's select option 2. Let's see what the audience said, and then we can make our. Ooh. You see, it's the ethical factor. It always does this. It's really interesting. It's such a divisive thing. Okay, yeah, let's show impact. We're going for
But again, Chris, coming back to the ethical side, again, when we start talking about putting people out of work, right? Again, you can play ethics and morality all day long, but that's a tough spot to be in when you're the one, you know, making that decision.
Yeah, the feedback is it's an okay answer. I think it's a tricky thing that the system is trying to give us is trying to say, look, it's okay that you chose this route, but you know, also probably you know, not paying the ransom would only be an okay answer too, because we're literally between a rock and a hard place. Third-party ransomware firms are well versed in negotiating, likely to facilitate a successful resolution, and be, you know, able to purchase the decryption keys. It will cost a significant amount of money. It might be morally questionable. It may break federal laws. We don't really understand any of that, but that's the decision that we've made. So that's the route that we're going to go down. Okay, what's next? Having paid the ransom demand via a third party, we have received the decryptor from the ransomware group. Our SOC is not happy with running a random binary from a hacker across the estate. Operations are demanding you get back online ASAP. They just paid a lot of money to get this software for the systems to get back up and running quickly. IT say they can quickly package something and schedule it to run on all systems. So what are our options here now? Deploy the decryptor immediately to restore services ASAP. We need to get everything back up. IT don't know what they're on about, just run the decryptor. Option 2, copy all encrypted files to a bespoke decryption machine, then copy files back to the normal systems. You understand IT's concern. Perhaps they can use the decryptor in a sheet dip environment. Option 3, work with a third party to create a trusted decryption tool. There are companies that will reverse engineer the decryptor to make safe versions that IT can run with confidence. But obviously that option is going to have so all of these go to RTO, right? Option 1 is quick, and option 3 is much longer. But we have no idea what might happen if we choose option 1 over option 3. So what are you thinking, Jake?
This is a scenario where I'm going to be picking a best bad plan. I don't like any of it, right? So I understand all the options here. You know, my concern with number 2 is that even technically feasible? Most ransomware variants that we see, you know, are using basically a unique key per system that they encrypt. And so if that's the case, copying all the files over is not going to work there, right? Because again, it's going to be copying files from lots of different keys with a master key supplied. So this is a tough thing to look at. Presuming that technically this is feasible, this is where I'm going to lean on Kev to tell me if number 2 is technically feasible. If number 2 is technically feasible, that's the route that I think we're going with. If number 2 is not technically feasible, that's going to be a bigger discussion where I'm literally up between 1 and 3. And if I'm up between 1 and 3, I gotta say things aren't getting any worse than they already are, and I'm probably going to gravitate to 1.
So I can feed in here. So this ransomware, the way it works, it will encrypt the file and it will generate an associated info file. That info file alongside it contains all the information required to decrypt. So we can, in this instance, copy all of those files off to a sheep dip, decrypt them and restore them. Now, the thing I'll say is across the size of our estate, that is going to take a significant amount of time in terms of copying all those files, across the network, especially when we start looking at the subsidiaries that were impacted, and then return them. So there is a yes, we can do it. There is a significant amount of time involved in it.
Well, then here's my revised answer. Then I'm going to lean on that third-party firm who has great threat intelligence about the actor that we're dealing with, and see basically, the trustworthiness of the actor. There's truly honor among thieves here. I'm going to gravitate to option one then.
Okay, I'm no expert, but my dad always says use the right tool for the job. So I would head towards option three. I guess the risk with option one, for me, it feels like the natural risk with option one is we don't know what it is. That's like quite. So I would always be headed to option three. I'd rather take the extra time and know that we could just it would work across the entire estate, at a faster rate than option two. And again, that we would hope that we could trust the tool. So right, but let's have a look and see what the audience is saying.
Ooh.
See?
Oh, Chris, see, they agree with you here, right? This one again is tough, and it requires us to know a lot about our own operations here. That we both operations as well as threat intelligence that aren't part of the scenario here. But again, this is the kind working through one of these. You're going to kick off those discussions, and likewise, most folks even inside their org can't answer these questions either. So that kicks off the discussion, and hopefully they answer it before an event.
It's interesting in some of these tabletops. You feel like you often only get as far as do we pay the basically do we pay the ransom or not? Not like what and then what needs to happen, and then what needs to happen, and then what needs to happen. So it's Let's go with my option three. Go with the audience for the last. I think this is the last one actually. Okay, so there are well-known third parties that specialize in creating these custom decryption tools. Your IT teams will feel more at ease deploying these across the network and are significantly less likely to cause more damage. This will be the quickest way to restore services. We didn't do a bad job of flattening those curves, that wasn't too bad. Okay, right, in conjunction with the IT, we're going to run the decryptor. We got time here, Kev. This is going to be fun. This is what we call at Immersive Labs, everyone, the $10 million lab, because it's got the decryptor in it.
Yeah. So, and again, this is where VirusTotal came in to help us understand what Garmin actually did here. So, as we saw at the very beginning, they uploaded a copy of the ransomware that was specifically targeted at Garmin, and we saw that at VirusTotal. And we were able to get a hold of that sample, and we were able to run it in our sandbox and encrypt files with that. So we know that thing was real ransomware. And then several days later, we see that Garmin have just uploaded an entire package, which includes a decryptor and a decryption key. Now, we already know that the only way you can decrypt these files is if you've purchased that key. There's no other way to get it. There's no way of generating that key. The only way you've got it is if the attackers have given it to you. And what we did, and we'll see this very shortly, is we took that decryptor. Well, first of all, we took the encryptor and we encrypted a load of files. And then we dropped the decryptor in and we ran the decryptor, and it successfully decrypts our files. Now, again, we're drawing a line here. We're making some assumptions, but this decryptor that was uploaded by Garmin does in fact decrypt successfully the files that were encrypted by the malware specifically targeted at Garmin. And the other interesting thing that we learned from this is when we looked at the bind files, we can tell very quickly from the package that was uploaded by Garmin that this was in fact a third-party service. So it was created by a company called I want to say MZsoft. They owned the binary is signed by them, and this is designed to run take any decryption key and run it. So this is something they'll have shared with anybody who's purchased a WastedLocker decryption key, which is what we'll see very shortly. And what we actually saw from Garmin when they uploaded this was they uploaded a pack. And that pack was something that would be distributed across the network. It would install endpoint detection. It would install some sensors, it would install and run the decryptor and then report back. So this one bundle was designed to be, we don't know exactly how they were going to deploy it, but it was probably deployed through a share or through a group policy or some kind of process. So we have the decryptor. And we can see the decryption key that goes along with this binary file. And if we take a quick look at the binary file, then we can see who it was created by. So we can have a look at these properties. Come on. So there we can see this was created by MZSoft, and it's a decryptor for WastedLocker. And we can see that this file was created well in advance of Garmin being affected. So that tells us, that gives us some kind of information. I'm just going to run this, and away it's going. So it's already decrypted my first file. So we give this a few minutes, and it will have restored my files. And the nice thing about this specific decryptor, it gives me a couple of options. So it lets me try a safe decryption where it doesn't delete the original files, so that if anything goes wrong, then I can go and try to manually recover those files as well. So all in all, this is a nice, safe program built by a trusted, reputable company. So I am fully at ease deploying this across my entire estate.
Also, you would assume that if you're paying a third party, if something goes wrong with this, you've got support there that can help you fix it to make sure it does work properly, which obviously you don't get with the key straight from the gangsters. Okay, I think that's the end. I don't think we need to. We've only got one option, so I think we're wrapping up. Just as we've got 5 minutes or so, that obviously the question panel is open, Jake. I know that you're going to deal with any questions that pop up in there, but I had some questions about kind of the nature of these sorts of exercises. You've obviously done a ton of tabletops before, like thinking about things like frequency and depth. Like what would you say are the optimum ways to run these kinds of exercises? What creates the most value for an organization in going through these kind of exercises? And also, where do you think there are challenges in doing them? What makes them hard to do?
I think, probably the biggest thing, let me start with the challenges, right? The hardest part about, I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? So definitely played a bit of that. And you're playing, Chris, of course, the Dungeon Master here, or the Master of Ceremonies, the Inject, Observer Controller, whatever the word you use for that is. The tabletop lives and dies with the, really the success of it lives and dies with the DM, right, or the Observer Controller, the Chris. Now, Chris had, and please don't take me, knocking down Chris's job, or Chris had an easy job today, right? Because seriously, because the platform made his job easy. So rather than there being a set of, basically like a wide range of you can do anything, we were constrained to making one of a few sane choices, right? Most of them were sane. And so I would say that where I see a lot of tabletops, kind of fall apart, as well as see a lot of folks not want to do tabletops in the future, is where you get one of those like super aggressive DMs, like, I'm gonna throw him a curveball, I'm gonna whatever. It's like, that's not, that's not really gonna help us in the long run, right? I mean, I need people to come away. For instance, when I'm running one of these and somebody makes like a really bad decision, like phenomenally bad, we're like, okay, let's talk about why that's really bad and let's reset, right? Literally, like, you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? And you're like, you want to open the door, flip to page 110, but if you don't, and of course, if you're like me, you flip to page 110 and then you find out like some, booby trap got you. You're like, okay, never mind. And you immediately had your thumb on that other page, so you take the other route. That's what I want to do. It's not about it's the learning, not the success or failure. Success is in the learning, right? So I think that's really, as far as, my big takeaways, right, for tabletops, that's it. It's designing the scenario in a way that you can help mold ideal outcomes. And I think the platform here, helps do that. As far as the frequency goes, it really depends on your audience, right? Tech teams, I'm in the monthly to quarterly. Getting executives in the room, right, or higher level stakeholders to participate in these kind of discussions, their time is more valuable necessarily. And so it's a little bit harder to get them in. And there, if I can get everybody involved in one annually, even if it's not everybody together on the same day, right? Maybe we're running them quarterly, and I'm rotating through the different staff. That seems to work well for me.
Yeah, interesting that and I kind of touched on it at the beginning. The branching storylines mean that you can revisit scenarios and deliberately choose to make can make a different choice. That's why I've described it in the past as a bit like Bandersnatch for breaches. It's kind of that choose your own adventure means that the exercise becomes repeatable, and you can actually begin to understand where, if you do a thing too early in the exercise, the impact that that potentially has as you knock on further down. We have one of these on Travelex, for example, and if you do the PR too soon, you're kind of done, because you've held your hands up too soon, and suddenly all that happens is you're being bashed by the media through the whole exercise. So there's finding that balance becomes part of the learning nature of the exercise. I think we're out of time. I'm disappointed we're out of time. I've had fun.
We've got a couple more minutes actually. I've been given the stick. All right.
Wow.
I continue this discussion because this is fantastic, right? Because I'm with you, Chris. So we're going to take a couple more minutes here. And one thing I want to mention over here is on the right, to the right of the screen, the stock price, RTO, and company reputation. This is something that's missing in the vast majority of tabletops, right? Most people, forgetting the graphs, right? The graphs are pretty eye candy, but take the graph out of it, right? It's the immediate feedback across multiple angles about what you did. And a lot of folks, less experienced than yourself, Chris, right? In doing an observer controller thing like this, they don't communicate that very well. It's another thing we see in failed tabletops. They don't communicate the impact, the immediate impact of a particular action. And without communicating that, it's very difficult for you to learn. If you only get kind of that post-mortem report, it's very difficult to look and go, well, where did I go wrong? Right? You're looking at these series of injects and where you snake kind of through. And again, I love that on the platform side. It's awesome.
One of the things we left out of this, because it adds time and doesn't necessarily work as well in a facilitated exercise, is that there is also a way of rating confidence and also inputting into the platform, so that when you get the report at the end, if you made a decision that was a good answer but you actually had low confidence in it, it gives a good way of showing, okay, well, they got luck. Basically, they got lucky, right? They got lucky. They happened to choose multiple choice, right? They chose B, and it turned out that B was a good answer. So there's also some of those things in there, like the confidence weighting that can show, lots of bad answers but high confidence, as well as good answers with low confidence, for example. So those are all things that can then be reported back through the platform, which hopefully ends up being useful the next time an exercise gets run. Now we definitely are over time.
Well, there you go. Right. I was going to make the analogy of playing pool and having slop, right? So slop doesn't count. You got to call your shots, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, hey guys, this has been fantastic. I have not had this much fun on a webcast in I don't remember how long. Thank you so much for bringing this content to the SANS community. For everybody that voted with us, thank you so much for being on here. I'm going to kick this back over to Jessica to close us out. Kev and Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake.
Jessica?
All right. Well, that's all the time that we do have for today. Thank you to our speakers, Jake, Chris, and Kev, for that great presentation, and to Immersive Labs for sponsoring this webcast, which helps brings this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.